sign of a mature human being, the ability to say sorry.
The same amount of Szoboszlai and Foden combined this year for Jacob Murphy. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Anthony Elanga got absolutely demolished week in, week out by Forest fans. And now he's our most important player. That's from barfing up Lego. 11 goals and 10 assists. What do you think about Garnacho? Do you think he deserves an apology?
On the basis of this season, I'd actually probably say no. His ability to speed up play just with a quick pass before it gets played in behind, I think is really impressive too. I think he's got everything.
That's an amazing point. Mikel, sorry. Football is an emotional game. And thus, we get angry sometimes and we say things we don't mean. But the sign of a mature human being, the ability to say sorry. That's what I say to my wife regularly. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through each Premier League team and we're going to apologise on behalf of some of you guys. You've got involved, which I very much appreciate. And we're going to talk about a player from each team that maybe deserves a cheeky apology.
Mm-hmm.
Dougie joins me. Once again, we did a podcast earlier in the week ranking transfer rumours from each Premier League club. So make sure you go check that out and check out The Truth, which is Dougie's podcast. Link to that is in the description. If you want to sound good down the pub with your friends, you can just copy what he says or just listen to it now and do the exact same. So, last time we went with Arsenal at the start. I think let's mix it up.
Oh, I like it.
Let's mix it up. I'm not having it. Not every time, Arsenal. Okay. Just lost half the audience. So, Wolves. Jean Rickner Bellegarde. Kieran Hughes says, Bellegarde at Wolves. Under O'Neill, when he came on, a lot of Wolves fans felt like we were down to 10 men. And now I honestly don't mind if he or Cunha start. He's a man completely transformed. Now, the stats don't look great. 36 appearances, 2 goals, 6 assists. But in the sort of latest iteration of Wolves, of course, under Pereira, he has really, really caught the eye. There's a game, I think they beat Aston Villa. I think it was like yours.
Yeah.
He was brilliant.
He was brilliant.
I remember we had a night out and we were watching that game and I was thinking, he's good. I might be watching on the train on the way there. He has really, really stepped up, as have several players at Wolves. There's probably a few players at Wolves that you could apologise to. And it shows how much a manager can make that change for a team. But in terms of him as having that physicality, but also once he gets the ball, doing something with it, he's been totally reborn.
Yeah, he's been sensational. And I think Wolves seem like they've taken a little bit of a shift in their transfer policy in recent years as well. They're not just signing the offcuts of the big teams. They're kind of looking in more interesting markets. So Bellegarde arrived from Strasbourg in 2013. And it's a market that they're
2013?
Sorry, 2023. Wow, he would be really old. No, 2023. And it's a market they're clearly using a little bit, Liga, because Menezzi arrived from Reims and Agbadou from Reims again.
He's been great.
Yeah, I think they both have, to be honest, in January. You know, Strand Larsen arriving from Celta Vigo. It felt like a few years ago, and this signing obviously worked out, but Cunha arriving from Atletico Madrid, Mateus Nunes from Sporting CP, Guedes from Valencia, who else was there? Trincao coming from Barcelona. It felt like they were really looking for the offcuts of those top European clubs, and maybe it was a little bit of a mix mash in terms of whether players thought they should be at Wolves, whether they wanted to be at Wolves. And I think you need a little bit of, obviously, that top level quality, but players that can grow with the side and feel like they are lucky to be at Wolves, and I want to take Wolves forward, and whether I get a move on the back of that or not is good. And Bellegarde felt like a player that was in that Agbadou and Menezzi category of really excited to play for Wolves and really driven. And I think he's shown a lot of quality. I like him in terms of his counter-attacking capabilities, for sure. I don't know what he'd be like in a higher quality side that were facing more deep blocks, but for now, I think it works well.
Yeah, my only concern here with Wolves is just as a fan of a team in the Championship that often goes on bad runs and then kind of fixes it because you have to out of desperation. The form that I'm seeing with Wolves looks like it's sustainable, but come a new context, new start of the season, will it continue to be? Because I think it's tough. It's tough, and all of the squads are very, very strong. But I think he does with Andre in there and João Gomez in there and Bellegarde in there. It's a really lovely balanced midfield there. And yeah, the way he gets about the pitch, I think is cracking and needed. You need someone who's going to kind of cover that ground. So long may it continue. And Mr. Bellegarde, we're sorry.
First one.
Yeah. Next up, West Ham. Nicholas Füllkrug, just 17 appearances, 3 goals, 2 assists. Has had a lot of critics for being a poor signing. I think, obviously, when you've done what he's done the season before at Dortmund and looked pretty good. I don't know. I'm still not sure how he didn't score in the Champions League final. And it wasn't really his fault in terms of the finishes, from what I remember, if I do remember correctly. But when he has been fit, we've just spoken about West Ham in terms of ranking a transfer rumour for them. They have been so bad. They are so fortunate that the bottom 3 have been as poor as they've been. But when I see him on the pitch, there does feel his movement feels very elite. Like he seems very, very intelligent in what he's doing and how he's doing it. There's a bit of a Giroud like vibe to him. Like his headers are really, really clever. Like sometimes I like a player who they sort of do a header and you're like, how's he done that with his head? That sounds weird, but I think there's so much to come from him, and I do believe he will come good. I guess the fear is the injury, so it's sort of half apology, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, given his age, 32, it felt like he really needed an amazing first season, and it just hasn't necessarily happened, mainly because of injuries, and with Antonio being out as well, it's really affected West Ham. And you were probably expecting more from Somerville, who again has had injury issues, like a number of their signings like Ward-Prowse, etc. And then we talked about it in the previous pod, but Kudus and Paqueta, like really disappointing as well. And it's kind of been left to Jared Bowen once again to kind of keep them vaguely above water. And they're also fortunate that Spurs and Man United have been so bad, because I think eyes have been averted at the bottom of the table, and Everton have had this recovery, and Wolves have had this recovery, and suddenly there'd be a lot more focus on the fact that West Ham just haven't really improved much, in terms of results at least, under Graham Potter. So troubling times for West Ham. And they also spent a large amount of money last year as well.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, we definitely did a video going, look, they've got this and that and this. They've got, it feels very West Ham in terms of like a lot of names there. Or, maybe not the last David Moyes version, but the version before that. We've got some sexy guys there, but it's just sort of not totally clicking together.
Dortmund will also be delighted as well, because they used that Fulkrug money to bring in Serhou Guirassy, who was about £14 million, I think. I think there was an agent fee in there as well, but just turned into one of the bargains of the season. I think he's been immense, and such a good penalty box operator as well. His finishing, in the Champions League, in the Bundesliga, for a poor Dortmund side for much of this campaign has been brilliant. So
really the apology here is from Borussia Dortmund to West Ham.
Yes.
Spurs. This is the player that set this off for me. Brennan Johnson. It's funny, but a lot of Spurs fans don't like him. 47 appearances, not all, of course. 17 goals, 7 assists.
Pretty impressive.
You cannot argue with that goal output and his ability to arrive at the back post. Can wingers who provide that output but aren't necessarily aesthetically pleasing in terms of dribbles and stepovers and all that fun, are they always going to go under the radar in general when it comes to praising them? If you think of there's been some comparisons to like the Raheem Sterling vibe, although I think Sterling's a more talented dribbler than Brennan Johnson. But I don't see Brennan Johnson as a winger. I see him as a wide forward. I know that's maybe semantics, but that's what he's about. He's been about scoring goals for his whole career, really. And I thought the first year it all felt a bit too big for him. This year, I think he looks like he belongs a little bit more, and the goals have flowed. I think Spurs fans need to give him a break.
For sure. I mean, going from 5 goals to 17 is an amazing turnaround. And also, it's not like they don't have the option of a more all-round attacking threat on the right wing who's amazing on the ball and can beat a man in Kulusevski. Like, they could play Kulusevski on the right. So the fact that he's been used a lot more centrally this year has given Brennan Johnson this series of games to get momentum, and there's been patches in there, and I agree with you. I think arriving in the same summer that you lose Harry Kane, there's obviously an enormous emotional pressure on you as well, and he slightly got lost in amongst it. But this year, in a side that have really struggled, and I look at Spurs' starting 11, and I really am quite baffled about how bad they've been.
Yeah, it's great.
And I think it comes down to, again, just, it's very easy to say from the outside, but just mentality and their lack of focus in games and their ability to lose their heads in key moments. They are so brittle, both in defence and in mentally.
They're mentally knackered.
Yeah.
I think they're exhausted by like fighting what Spurs is thought of by the outside world and the pressure that comes with that, and maybe Ange in the way that he's sort of dealt with interviews, and so therefore, you know, the story around that as well. I think it's all, and then game after game after game, the intensity of the way that they play, the injuries obviously that they've had. I think they're just knackered.
And they'd probably be looking for this season, a difficult season, to have the guy that's been Mr. Reliable over the last few years in Son Heung-min to step up, and Son's just had a really poor season. So that's obviously a massive issue for them. And then you go for probably their next most talented player in their squad, James Maddison. He hasn't always been a guaranteed starter this year as well. In and out the side. I think his numbers when he has played have been pretty impressive, but he is a little bit inconsistent as a footballer as well. So just a really forgettable campaign. But I think Brennan Johnson does deserve credit for 17 goals.
I do think he'll need 3 seasons of 15 plus for people to shut up. Is that right or wrong? Let us know. Sorry, Brennan. Nottingham Forest. Anthony Elanga, 6 goals, 10 assists. So I'll tell you who wrote this tweet after I've read out the tweet. Anthony Elanga got absolutely demolished week in, week out by Forest fans, and now he's our most important player. That's from Barfing Up Lego.
What a name.
A great name. Being crucial in terms of those counter-attacks. It's interesting. I didn't know he was getting demolished.
I don't remember that at all, but then maybe I wonder it's not in Forest circles. I'd also say Milenkovic or Murillo's probably, or Sells has probably been their player of the year, or Olorena, one of their back 5. But look, I think he's been amazing, and it's worth remembering that in a similar system or style at Man United under Ralph Rangnick, he was one of the only players that played well under Ralph Rangnick. Then Ten Hag arrives, and he kind of gets lost in the chaos of the Ten Hag era. And they sign a number of players like Mason Mount, etc. And there's just so much more competition for your place. And he moves to Nottingham Forest. And now the output is really solid. I mean, 6 goals and 10 assists in a system that really suits him. I mean, he scored that sensational goal against Man United about a month ago.
Yeah.
Running from close to his edge of his own box. And that sort of asset, that pace, I think he is one of the quickest players in the league with the ball at his feet.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? What do you think is the biggest factor of improvement when a player like Elanga leaves Man United? And it's kind of a bit of a theme today, isn't it, in terms of those players who've been in those sort of top 6 squads, but now getting a new opportunity. What do you think is more important here, like the sort of less spotlight, or just the opportunity to have more minutes?
That's a good point. I think you can't really separate the two, because obviously at Nottingham Forest, if you have 2 poor games back to back, it's not really a headline outside of Nottingham. You have 2 bad games back to back at Man United, and people are instantly on your back. The social media side of it, I think, just goes so under the radar as well. The fact you've got so many more people DMing you, replying to your stuff, just sending you abuse, basically.
Yeah.
And Man United players get abuse whether they're playing well or badly. Like they're polarizing whether they're playing well or not. So I think there is just so much that goes with playing for these top clubs that sometimes you can just leave and go to a nice place like Nottingham, not the biggest city, not a particularly controversial football team. You know, most neutrals seem to enjoy you, and just breathe in a bit of air.
Yeah, I think stylistically it works really, really well. I like him as a player. I'm intrigued to see him in a different team. I think in transition he's always going to be really, really effective. I think having someone like Chris Wood there to work with. Because if you're thinking of a front 2, it's not that. But in transition, it is kind of Chris Wood and Elanga. That has worked, and therefore you've got yourself 10 assists. But yeah, I mean, I guess the opposite of the point is that he apparently was getting demolished week in, week out. So that's a fascinating one, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, sorry, Anthony. Jacob Murphy. This is, I think, is a great shout. Jacob Murphy does need, and Jacob, I'd like to apologise, because I think you've taught us all a lesson here. Because I think if you are a good, diligent pro and an intelligent man, you can continue to develop as the seasons go by and take an opportunity when it's there. In the last podcast, we were talking about, them needing maybe to improve in that area. But we've been saying that for a while now. And 9 goals, 13 assists. So many links when it comes to him. But he's effective every single season. And do you know who's going to be the beneficiary of this, I think? Newcastle. But whoever is the next person to come in, I think with the profile that Newcastle often go down, it will be a sort of young, exciting player. And when we're talking about pressure, Jacob Murphy will alleviate that pressure, because if, one, they might not start straight away because Jacob Murphy deserves that spot. But also, if they are getting games and then need to come out for a bit, you've got such a great 7 out of 10, and also output on that right wing in Jacob Murphy. And I have sort of spoken down about him regularly. I think most people kind of naturally do, but it's unfair. Like he's there on merit now. Like I think the problem will be is will people ever truly see him in that light, or is it too late for that?
I think that, yeah, you're right. I think for years to be the player that everyone talks about as replaceable must be pretty grinding. And people have talked about the fact that maybe they could go for a more naturally creative midfielder in there, like when they were linked with James Maddison. I thought that made a lot of sense, but people always go back to right wing. And if he wasn't playing for Newcastle and he put up these numbers this season, everyone would be saying, oh, Newcastle should go for him.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that he's quite an old school winger as well, like will often get to the byline, his crossing from wide's excellent as well. And his output this season, only 9 players in the whole league being directly involved in more goals.
Wow.
More than Szoboszlai, the same amount of Szoboszlai and Foden combined this year for Jacob Murphy. It's amazing. It's amazing. So full credit to him, because it was a difficult environment to be that right winger that everyone's criticised. And Miguel Almiron used to get it. Now it's Jacob Murphy. But huge props to him.
Yeah, I think it's his trajectory, which has taken like a second longer, which again, it shows us like success isn't linear, which is probably a good little segue into Man United. FPL Pops, Flowmate, says this: Garnacho. As a young player in the worst United team ever, that's Manchester United, time and again he's been our biggest threat in attack. He's been getting assists, playing passes across the box, which he rarely did last season, and now we're talking about getting rid. He deserves an apology. Fascinating to get your take on this, Dougie, because Garnacho is... Yeah, he's one that confuses a lot of people, because I think there are moments when he, for me, doesn't make the right decision, but he is also clearly a live wire, and he's also very, very young. 54 appearances this season, 11 goals and 10 assists. What do you think about Garnacho? Do you think he deserves an apology?
On the basis of this season, I'd actually probably say no.
Yeah.
But the thing about selling Garnacho is replacing a guy that got 10 goals last year and got 11 goals this year at 20 years old. It's going to cost actually quite a lot of money to sign an upgrade on that output. And I find Garnacho enormously frustrating because, like you, I think he often takes the wrong decisions. I think he often looks to shoot effectively just more than create a chance for his teammate. And I think his shooting can be ridiculously wild at points. Yeah. And it is frustrating. Like between the 28th of November and the 16th of March, he didn't score at all. And we've timed this podcast very well, and it's a well-timed question because his recent form's been really good. I thought he played well against Athletic Club. He played well on the weekend against Brentford. But does he deserve an apology on the basis of this season? Probably not. But then also, at Man United's attackers, there's so little spark in there that £60 million seems really attractive. But who are you bringing in? And maybe if it's just Matheus Cunha comes in, Garnacho leaves, I think they can't afford to wait on Garnacho becoming the complete all-round package. Like, they kind of need someone to hit the ground running. So I'd accept that. But if it's Garnacho to leave and they sign another project player like they did with Højlund or Xerxes, particularly Højlund, to replace Garnacho, who feels like he might become a very good, if not ever quite elite player, then I'd be reluctant to let him go. So for me, he doesn't actually deserve an apology this season because he's been part of an absolutely woeful team, and at times he's been enormously frustrating to watch. But there's a huge decision to make this summer.
Yeah, I think he probably deserves a bit more kindness overall, and you let things go. I don't think it's ever been harder to be a young Manchester United player, because the the desperation that you have for them to be great is because of the overall malaise, which is not their doing. The squad is a mess. And in 2025, when you kind of need to bring in some money, ideally, to sort of fit all the regulations, you're then going, okay, what assets have we got? And I've said this a few times where with Chelsea, yes, okay, they've spent an outrageous amount of money, but going into the next window, they have assets that can get them 20 million who aren't Cole Palmer and Caicedo, who aren't their, like best young players. For Man United, they don't have that at all. So he's also being thrown into this question of shall we get rid of him? Whereas if you go back to when they were in a much stronger position, you go, I think we need to just take him out for a bit. Whereas it just feels very like it's on a knife edge with him a lot. And everyone's kind of understandably impatient with him. And so then when he's making these decisions that you're going, come on, like the problem is you can't take him out because he's not a bad player. So it's fascinating and a bit of an awkward one and making the decision to kind of cash in or stick with him is. I'm delighted I don't have to make that decision. Let me know what would you do, Man United fans? Talk to me. Man City, Mateo Kovacic, 40 appearances, 7 goals, 2 assists. He's been ever present with Rodri's injury. Very important for Pep. Does Kovacic survive the Manchester City summer overhaul due to his vital part played this season? What do you reckon?
Yes, I think so. I think there's more players. I mean, if you're losing De Bruyne, I think Gundogan's got a decent chance of leaving. I think Bernardo Silva might leave as well. Keep Kovacic. I think the reason behind Kovacic's signing initially was probably to play 20 Premier League games. I don't think he was never planned to be this constant in the City side, and he was definitely never planned to be the Rodri replacement. I think ideally, obviously, he can play as a 6, but Kovacic covering huge swathes of grass is not really a dream scenario because he's pretty slow. Yeah. And not the most mobile or agile, etc. He's completely different, and he's not as physically dominant as someone like Rodri either. You want him breaking lines with his dribbling, or his best games for Chelsea came with Kante alongside him, or even Jorginho, just someone to kind of shield him.
Yeah, or like Brozovic for Croatia as well.
For sure. But he does deserve credit on particularly his goal scoring this year. 6 league goals, only Haaland and Foden have scored more. And you consider De Bruyne has scored 4, Bernardo scored 3. Gundogan's yet to score in the Premier League this year. Kovacic has popped up with some big goals. So props to him for, sticking out this really miserable season for Man City. They are finishing with a lot more momentum than they started since this kind of switch to a 4-2-2-2. And with Rodri and Haaland having missed the last couple of months as well, to just get over the line and just finish in a Champions League spot.
Yeah.
And hopefully...
Might even pinch second, man.
Yeah, and from their perspective as well, they could finish second with an FA Cup. It's for all the misery of the season, it's not too bad.
Yeah, Matteo, we're sorry.
We're sorry.
Liverpool, Cody Gakpo. I reckon there's a lot of people. There are some Gakpo tweets knocking about.
Quick delete
on that one. Was used in multiple roles last season. But this season, on that left-hand side, 17 goals, 6 assists. He's been very, very good. Do you think that he said himself, last year, I was sort of in this position, that position. Feels like he just loves that trademark kind of either get to the back post and Salah's been able to find him, which has been a nice addition and a huge part of Salah's sort of rise in assists because it's a great option for him. But also that, that cut in that he's always been great at as he's been able to just sort of thrive and get the reps in that position. Would Cody Gakpo's effectiveness change next season if Liverpool prioritise a striker signing in the summer? Would there be enough creativity in this team? Because, I think with Luis Diaz buzzes around, you're not really feeling like he's an out-and-out striker. He's even peeling off to that left-hand side at times to allow Gakpo maybe to come a bit more centrally. If they go out and out and get themselves a proper striker, quote unquote, do you think that could hurt Gakpo?
Potentially. I mean, you need to see what their relationship's going to be like. I mean, I think he's worked with a variety of different strikers now. Luis Diaz, Darwin Nunez, and Diogo Jota all feel very, very different. And I think he's been pretty consistent this year. I was surprised to see that Diaz had created 21 more chances and completed 21 more dribbles. He has played more minutes as well and scored slightly more goals. Because from an outsider's perspective who hasn't thought much about this question, I'd have thought Gakpo had just had a better season than Luis Diaz, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look into it a little bit more, it feels like Diaz is more effective. I feel like both of them...
His numbers might be skewed a touch just by playing in
Central
areas.
areas.
So there might be moments where he gets it in a different area.
I think, I also think Gakpo probably took more heat in the early part of his career because they both signed in January, although in different years, and Diaz went off like an absolute rocket, kind of established his reputation. Gakpo started quite slowly. I think it was only 7 goals in his first 26. Then last year, 16. This year, 17. So there's been a nice rise there. But I found Gakpo pretty crucial in that November to January period. I think it was 14 goals in 22 games in that period between the 30th of October and 29th of January, which is effectively when Liverpool won the league. They built up such a lead that whatever's happened in the last few weeks hasn't ultimately come a cropper for them. Whereas Luis Diaz I found more frustrating to watch. I really like Cody Gakpo. I think he's got enough skills to his skills in his bag, let's say, that he could kind of function with anyone.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm intrigued to see how Liverpool evolve next season. Is he the answer? Like always? Is the answer always Gakpo? No. Is he an answer? Like he's a really good answer to have knocking about. And I think like with the Euros and international tournaments, he's great. Like he always does well, and you can close your eyes and see a Gakpo goal at international level, and now with Liverpool, I think as well. And I think it's worked really, really well.
They were also just spoilt for so long that they had Sadio Mane, who I don't think anyone appreciated enough at the time, just how brilliant he was as that Salah foil. And I don't know whether he always sat that well with him being the Salah foil. But what a phenomenal player, and it's just very difficult, as Man City's forwards are finding, it's very difficult to back up these close to Premier League legends, these Premier League all-time greats.
Yeah, I'm not sure they will prioritise the striker too much. I've been sort of watching football recently. I do feel like there's a lot of strikers just stepping away from their centre backs, and centre backs not having to deal with anyone because that central area is so congested, but that back line still being pinned back by the two wide players who you can't wholeheartedly mark, if that makes sense, because you want to keep your sort of central block. So with that in mind, when we talk about foils, previously Sadio Mane starts here, makes that diagonal run, you go and find him that way. With Gakpo and Salah, you've almost got your two strikers up high and wide, and the way that Salah likes to sort of cut in or get to the byline, to have someone on that other side, we've just been talking about Brendan Johnson, similar kind of vibe with Gakpo. I think that's got some legs in it for a little while yet. I think that could be a bit of a continued evolution from a tactical point of view. So I think he's not going anywhere, and I think he'll continue to do well. Fulham, Calvin Bassey. Love Calvin Bassey.
What a player to watch.
Yeah. Obviously first spotted him personally the Rangers Europa League run, and he was just absolutely fantastic. But apparently he had some big mistakes last season, was written off quite early by fans as a mistake-prone defender. But now, on that left-hand side, it's been a huge part of their success because with Anthony Robinson bombing on, Calvin Bassey has to deal with a lot from a 1-1 perspective in terms of like balls being played into that channel. A bit like Dean Huijsen has actually done at Bournemouth. But also when he gets the ball, being positive, being willing to sort of beat the man, drive into sort of key areas to then bring someone out and then pop it off to Iwobi or Sanderberg or whoever it might be. He's been really, really good. Do you think we're going to see more and more of that as time progresses? These sort of the centre back position is just getting more and more important, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's such a. I mean, Calvin Bassey's not a new breed, but sort of mid-20s. And Maria is the same at Nottingham Forest. Just players that just break lines, just have fun out there, and don't seem too bothered about the concerns of what could happen if they lose the ball. Like imagine John Terry going on a 60-yard dribble. It just wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. And Calvin Bassey has that ability. I mean, he's completed more dribbles this season than Andreas Pereira, which is mad.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But then, Andreas Pereira is much more of a ball player, but still 14 dribbles completed. I think he's so fun to watch. He's obviously an absolute unit. And for a player that had a bit of a mistake-prone stint at Ajax as well, in a transition period for them, as you say, took some flack last year at Fulham as well. And really, people saw that Joachim Andersen signing and thought, oh, that's the guy to take Fulham to the next level. I actually feel like it's Bassi that's stepped up and kind of gone beyond Joachim Andersen this season. I think he's been immense.
It's going to be interesting if Anthony Robinson was to leave, like how that would change all of that, and would it allow him to thrive the way that he has been? But Calvin, we're sorry. Everton, Beto, he's fun. Rarely used under Sean Dyche, but the arrival of David Moyes saw Beto find an unbelievable hot streak. Do Everton still need to sign another centre forward? Perhaps one who is a bit more clinical to battle with Beto. Beto's got 11 goals, 1 assist. I think as long as you for a team that's sort of mid-table, and for Everton, and this isn't a dig, they want players that look like they're working hard. I think everyone does, right? But in particular, I think Everton want to see that. I think if you can play like Beto does, where you there's elbows and there's arms and it's just I wouldn't want to be near his organs. Do you know what I mean? I quite like to see that. That's kind of QPR got to play that. You've got a player called Michi Frey. Looks like a bit of a robot, but when he starts running, he's just you can see he's putting an effort to run, if that makes sense. And Beto is a handful. And they needed someone to be a handful for them. And, if you think David Moyes, you think West Ham, you think Antonio. I think Antonio is a better player with more quality on the ball. But there's similarities in that in terms of being, difficult as a centre-back and someone who will run in behind but will also sort of, hold up the ball. And I think Beto does deserve an apology because he was nearly out the door, wasn't he?
Very close.
Yeah.
Very close. And this is a guy that was playing in the 4th tier in Portugal in 2018-19. It's an amazing story. And then has that spell at Udinese. And I actually thought he might go to a sort of European club or a club playing European football. Ends up at Everton. I think it was 3 goals in his first 30 league games. And then this season, it's really actually his just efficiency in front of goal. And it was difficult for him initially because it wasn't quite sure who was going to be starting between him and Calvert-Lewin. Actually, I say that. It felt like Calvert-Lewin was always going to start, no matter how bad his form was. And Beto would get a few minutes here and there. And I totally get what you mean about him, his aesthetics. So many of his finishes, he's almost falling over, or he just gets a toe on it before a goalkeeper and rounds the goalkeeper. And it's all sort of a little bit clumsy. But it's very effective.
Yeah, who cares, right?
For sure. And he scored big goals this season against teams in and around Everton as well. He scored 2 against Leicester, he scored 1 against Ipswich, against United, also scored against Liverpool, which is always going to, ingratiate you to the fans as well. So yeah, great campaign from him. And Everton needed someone other than Iliman Ndiaye to get it together in forward areas, and he has.
Sorry, Beto.
Sorry.
That's nice. I think that's the best one. Crystal Palace, Daichi Kamada. What a turnaround this has been in recent weeks. James Thompson says, this is a Palace fan-specific one, but as of late, it has to be Kamada. I've never seen a player so quickly hated and had higher standards held to him, but the last few games, and especially at Wembley, he was outstanding. I really hope it continues. He stepped in, and I think the problem was, obviously, you've lost Elise. You're not winning games, although I thought the Palace fans kept incredibly calm, which, testament to them for that, and got their rewards recently, obviously, with the performance from him. I think the big difference here is that the focus for him was, with Elise going, he felt like he was going to sort of carry the creative burden, or certainly help with Eze in that. And he just struggled, just massively struggled. In that game at Wembley against Aston Villa, he was fantastic. And it was, I did a video after it because I kind of felt compelled to, because it's what we want. You want to okay, stepping into this, we're maybe the underdog, but we're not afraid of this lot. And if everyone does their job and adds a little 10% to what they're about, we can win this game. And, Kamada in that double pivot as opposed to being a little bit higher up, it just works so much better. So much better. If he's willing to put in the tackles and the work rate and show that sort of an industrious side. And he was absolutely happy to do that and has been really, really good recently. And now that creative burden's kind of been taken away from a little bit. Munoz has been released a little bit. Sarr as an option. Mateta flying, and Eze, who is very comfortable with that creative burden. Kamada now looks like a much, much better player. It does show you, though, that like, one big game could just change you with the fan base, can't it?
For sure. I mean, it'll be remembered forever, that game and that performance. And
right,
so it should. So it should. I think it's very difficult to, as you mentioned, come in and replace Mikel Arteta. I think Mikel Arteta has proven this year at Bayern just how good he is and how good he already was in the Premier League as well. I think people kind of went, oh, yeah, but it's at Palace. Let's see what happens when he goes to a top club. He's been Bayern's best player this year. He's been outrageous. And Kamada is not as naturally creative. He doesn't have that elegance to his game, but it was a really good goal scorer under Ole Glasner at Eintracht Frankfurt. Then goes to Lazio, has a difficult year there. They changed manager a number of times. So disappointing campaign. And then gets off to quite a poor start at Palace, adapting to a new league with the intensity of the Premier League, which is what every new signing always talks about. But there's nothing like, as you say, performing like that in a huge game at Wembley. And you slightly look at some of the players that have left Eintracht Frankfurt in recent years, whether that's Jovic or Haller or Kolomwani. They've sold very effectively, or they've lost players at good times and maximised their abilities.
We've done it. We talked about it. We didn't do it in the end, about a video about both Atalanta and Frankfurt. There's a sort of like, be careful. Buying players from those kind of teams,
particularly Atalanta as
You've
well.
seen it. You will have seen him more than the when he was playing in Europe. Is he is he more of a 10, or do you think he's better at home in that double pivot with?
I always thought he was a 10 at Frankfurt. I mean, he played a fair bit on the left as well, but then at Lazio they played him deeper. He was often playing alongside Guendouzi, and it didn't quite work last year. I think he can do both roles, which is why it's nice for Palace. But if you negate the impact of Munoz on the right-hand side, there's not actually, and Sarr, I mean, is a bit of an exception to this, but it doesn't feel like a particularly quick team at times, Palace.
I think that's what he needs, Sarr, don't you,
yeah,
in particular?
Exactly. And I think Kamada needs runners. He needs space to operate. I actually back him to have a really good campaign next year. I think he'll vastly improve in the league.
Okay. Daichi, sorry. Next up, Enzo Fernandez. He has had 42 games, 7 goals, 13 assists. I didn't even know about this, but Enzo's hernia gave many fans a false perception of his quality to carry out a number 8 role. Pochettino often deployed Fernandez further forward last season, where he struggled due to chaotic tempo and the injury issues, which affected his mobility. However, under Maresca, in a slower tempo system, you can clearly see his football IQ shining through, as well as an ability to complete those short burst actions to make ball recoveries and arrive in the box, something he has done to great effect this season. His ability to arrive in the box has been really, really nice to see, because I think I was a little bit confused by what I thought he was and what he now kind of feels like. And actually, he is a number 8, and I think generally the number 8's not the star of a team, and maybe with Chelsea it is obviously Cole Palmer, but to be that 8, but to offer something in terms of picking up those goals, that is a real weapon if you can find it and have it. And he now feels like he could be worth the money more than he certainly did a year ago, right?
100%. And again, we've talked about it on both these podcasts. Like, arriving in January is really difficult. Arriving as one of 8 players signed in January is particularly difficult. And Chelsea were terrible for his first 6 months at the club. That was the year they finished 12th. He only won 3 of his first 18 league games at the club. Like, that's a really bad footing to get off on. But I think there has been a slow improvement. I think he was pretty solid under Pochettino in the final few months of that campaign last year as well. And you look at some of the underlying numbers, and it's surprising to find out that only Bruno, Palmer and Salah have created more than his 73 chances.
Wow.
He's also right up there for progressive passes, for passes into the final third. And when there is that cover of Caicedo either inverting at right back or Lavia in that side as well, and he is a little bit freer, there's a really good player in there. I don't think he'll ever justify the fee for me personally. I think it was always an overpay. And I do have I'm always slightly confused that Real Madrid are consistently linked with him as well, given their midfield options as well. It doesn't feel like they need another kind of number 8,
Yeah.
although he does potentially have more calmness on the ball than a Bellingham or a Valverde, etc. But I am always slightly puzzled by that. But he deserves credit and an apology from a lot of people outside of Chelsea, because I think Chelsea fans have actually really wanted this signing to work for a long time and been fiercely defensive of Moises Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez. And Caicedo has had an immense season, I think.
Yeah.
And it's easy to, because Chelsea's form has obviously been so patchy, great, terrible, solid, it's easy to go under the radar, but I think Caicedo's really stepped up.
Yeah, and look, the plan has always been for Chelsea, with the players that they brought in, for them to soon be devastating. And I think that midfield, that has all the ingredients that you want. I think it's great that you bring up Caicedo, who also deserves an apology. I think someone did that. But for him, he then allows someone like Enzo to be more attacking than he probably would be with a different kind of midfielder. I'm just a huge Lavia fan as well, so you've got depth there as well. Cole Palmer can be in there as well, depending on the game and the scenario. Enzo, we're sorry.
Sorry.
Brighton, Danny Welbeck. I feel like we had a discussion about Danny Welbeck last time you were on, about him. I was sort of pushing that he maybe deserves an England call-up. Everyone knows how I feel about Welbs. So it doesn't need an apology from me. I've always backed you, Danny. And we're ready for you on the Ripple Effect whenever you're ready. But 10 goals, 4 assists, still going strong. Do you think striker is one of those positions? Arsene Wenger said this about strikers kind of do age better in their 30s, as opposed to sort of, he was saying, like, you'll sell a winger at 27 because, you know, from the physical point of view and the things that are needed, you need that burst of speed, blah, blah, blah. Danny Welbeck, you know, with all the depth that they have, it's always such a kind of key cog for them. But I still think he's one that, like, I don't think people really give him the credit he deserves, personally.
I think that's because he's never had a massive goal-scoring season. I was actually looking at this yesterday. He's never scored 10 league goals in a campaign.
Really?
But he scored 9 3 times, and he's on 9 at the moment.
He's on 9 league goals.
He's on 9 league goals.
Come on, Danny.
Which, I mean, it's going to happen. It'd be one of the highlights of my season, because I love Danny Welbeck. I remember when he came on loan to Sunderland years ago, when we used to get really good loanees from Man United.
Yeah.
And he was immense at Sunderland back then. He scored Premier League goals for 5 clubs. And you're right in saying the sort of calibre of striker that he's seen off at Brighton. You know, obviously I still want Evan Ferguson's career to get back on track, but Evan Ferguson was highly thought of. You look at Neil Maupay eventually moving on from Brighton. You look at even someone like Victor Gyokeres, who never got a chance at Brighton. But, you know, Danny Welbeck's consistency and quality of finishes as well. Like, he's not just got one type of finish in his locker. I think there's so much dexterity to almost how he finishes. His little chips over the goalkeeper, etc. He's got an excellent sense of timing. I think he's a Premier League icon. I like him.
Nice. I'd love to know if someone could find out for me the amount of times that he's the pass to João Pedro when he's got an assist, or he's the pass before the pass.
Yeah.
Because he's been an amazing backboard for them. On behalf of the whole footballing community, Danny, sorry. Brentford, Mikel Damsgaard, 40 appearances, just the 3 goals, 11 assists, signed back in 2022 after impressing in the Euros, as we all know. Struggled with some serious injuries, only making 16 league starts in 22-23 and 23-24 seasons combined. He himself has stated that most coaches would have given up on him and wouldn't give him as much time as Thomas has given me. And he's so complete. I put him in, we did Team of the Year for EA for Sky, and I wanted to put him forward because every time I've watched him, he's been fantastic. And I was thinking, he's probably a bit of an eye test player. But then when I looked at his stats, like in terms of the defensive stats and the offensive stats, the key passes, the through balls, the assists, like he's right up there, like for both, like incredibly complete. And he is another one who's often the pass before the pass. I think it's partly down to the way that Brentford played this year, and I think they have been it's kind of gone under the radar. They've been one of the most fun teams to watch this season, in my opinion. And he has been very complete. We spoke about Enzo Fernandez there. It's sort of similar. Maybe he's a touch more attacking, naturally attacking, but he's been absolutely brilliant. And people had given up on him. They had. They thought he was done. So to come back like this is outrageous.
For sure. I mean, there could be 2 Brentford players that finished with 20 league goals. Absolutely insane.
They've got 3, they've got 10, haven't they? 2 on 18,
Yeah,
and
Vissa
Shada's
and,
got 10.
and Bomo are very close to 20. It's
Crazy.
absolutely nuts. And you look at what Thomas Frank and Brentford have had to go through with Tony leaving and Igor Thiago arriving, then getting injured. Eriksen had that spell there. I think they've got the 5th lowest net spend in the Premier League across the last 5 seasons. I think their wage bill is one of the lowest as well. And aside from a brief spell, was it last year, they've never really been in touch of relegation. I think Brentford are a super impressive club led by a super impressive manager. And Mikkel Damsgaard, as you say, you know, a really slight man who's had consistent injury issues. It might have just... His career might have slightly petered out, which is really unfortunate given how electric he looked at Euro 2020, which was in 2021, of course, but then had that few injury issues at Sampdoria and in early Brentford days. But I'm totally with you. He seems like he's got everything to his game. And now you're looking at a player that can also put in a shift defensively. I think only Norgaard's made more defensive actions. He's a very good dribbler. And his ability to speed up play just with a quick pass before it gets played in behind, I think is really impressive too. I think he's got everything.
That's an amazing point. Bournemouth. Oh, Mikel. Sorry. Bournemouth. Antoine Semenyo. 39 appearances, 11 goals, 7 assists. On this podcast, we chatted to Tom Jordan from Back of the Net podcast, Bournemouth fan, of course. And he said they were not expecting him to do what he's done. Originally signed as a striker, converted to playing off either wing. Big part of what Bournemouth are about in terms of these sort of hybrid forwards that can play along that front line and gives them a new depth, even without having extra bodies. Already bettered his output from last season, where he scored 8 goals, provided 3 assists. He has 118 shots taken this season, more than any other player in the Premier League. Use that stat wherever you want to. Question is, with big transfer rumours circling around Semenyo at the moment, how irreplaceable actually is he for Iraola? Could he get similar output from another player for a significantly lower fee? And could Semenyo get the same output elsewhere if he was to move on?
Difficult question. Difficult questions. Good questions.
Thank you.
Very good questions. But
Put
difficult to
you in a
answer.
corner here.
Yeah. Firstly, I would probably want to say an apology from Sunderland's perspective as well, because he went on loan to Sunderland in 2019-20 from Bristol. And I think he played 7 games. It was that he joined in January 2020. COVID happened, played 7 games and then left. And to be honest, in those 7 games, he didn't look particularly bright either. But this turnaround, I would never have predicted that this is a 50, 60 million pound player a few years later. So huge props to him for him in terms of his development. And also, I like the fact that in the biggest games this year, he's often popped up. You know, he scored 2 against Forest. He scored against City. He scored a brace where he scored 2 goals in 2 games against United, Chelsea. He's got assists against Arsenal, assists against Newcastle, assists against Chelsea. That bodes well for an adaptation to a bigger club who are more as expected of you. And I like his 2-footed nature. I like the fact he can play on both sides. I think there's kind of everything to his game. And look, you're never 100% sure on signings, whether how well they adapt to their teammates, how well they adapt to the expectations, the new area, whether they fit in with the squad as well as you expect, the manager, etc. But once you've put up a season like this in the Premier League, and last year as well, 11 league goals and assists, there's not that much to worry about. He's at a good age. And I like the fact that he gets this many shots. I know it's a little bit troubling that he hasn't scored more goals, given the fact he's taken so many shots, but being able to create angles for yourself and far off shots is a key component of any attacker, and he's got that in spades.
Yeah, purely a gut feeling. And again, you know, sorry, Antoine, broadly, but also sorry for this comment I'm about to make. I feel like he should stay there. I think stay there and be a nice juicy fish. I feel like I just wonder, the more I think about...
Is there certain clubs that you like the move for more than others? Do you like it for a Newcastle or a Man United more than a Arsenal or a Liverpool?
Yeah, I think... I mean, yeah, maybe a Newcastle could work, but obviously he's been on that left-hand side and they're a bit stacked over on that side. But as you say, he can play across the front line. Actually, he's gone on the right, hasn't he, regularly? Yeah, I think it's just like... Who knows if how the pressure would affect him. I feel like he needs to be playing. I think that's my fear. If he went to, say, an Arsenal, it would be one, and we're about to get to Arsenal's one, where you'd have the same problem where he's good. He's not Saka. And so there's a pressure on that player to be Saka level, and I think that can make life very difficult for you from an optics point of view in terms of how people are like responding to you as a player. Whereas I think at Bournemouth he can just continue to thrive for a while. But yeah, obviously it's up to him and the ambition there, and if they can go and get that money, because his profile is great. His profile is really, really nice. It's just a gut feeling. I think he just might thrive better where he is personally. But once again, Antoine, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Aston Villa. Will Broadbent says, I feel like Youri Tielemans got a lot of shit for that final season at Leicester. A lot of talk about how many minutes were in his legs since he's been a youngster. He looks at his best for Villa now. So Youri Tielemans, 52 appearances, 5 goals, 10 assists. Douglas Luiz, of course, left in the summer. Onana was signed. Kamara has had injury problems. Actually, they've had quite a few injury problems, Aston Villa, this year. But Tielemans has been there and playing as a 6, as an 8, as a 10. He's absolutely shown, I think, both his quality and his quantity, I guess, in terms of like the stamina that he's been able to provide. He's very he's so... Again, it's another one in this realm of, is he fast? No. But can he move? Yes. Is he a good passer? Yes. But is that his only thing? No. Like, is he going to get you some goals? Yeah. Is he just a goal scorer? No. Like, he's another sort of 8, like Enzo Fernandez, where you've got a little bit of everything there from him. And in this Champions League run as well, he's been absolutely fantastic as well in a range of positions. After what felt like probably by the expectations that were maybe there, a bit of a weak first season. Is this the second season? I think it's the second season. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, and it was a slow start. I think as you point out, in his first year, he only played more than 45 minutes once up until December time last year, and there was question marks about whether. Yeah, it was mainly because Douglas Luiz and Boubacar Kamara were both fit.
Killing it, yeah.
And then Douglas Luiz obviously left in the summer, and I don't think Villa fans expected them to replace... Well, they did. They brought in Onana, but replaced Tielemans' kind of spot in the squad, because Onana plays in the more sort of physical games. And I think Onana's actually had a fairly disappointing first year. And if I'm totally honest, maybe a little bit of a dip from sort of December time. But I saw this stat, and actually, I don't want to steal it. It was on Match of the Day the other day, that no player has been involved in more games this season in Europe's top 5 leagues than Youri Tielemans.
Wow.
Which is pretty amazing. He's right up there with Pedri, who Barcelona never rest. So huge props to him for being that available. And I think there is just this calmness to his game, and the ability to pick out the forward runners that Villa have in abundance is just absolutely vital to the way that Villa play. And I do think it kind of helps him that I don't think he's necessarily the most outstanding defender, but if you've got these 2 inverted 10s in McGinn and Rodgers doing so much work backwards and forwards, it's a great position for Tielemans to get on the ball, complete 60, 65 passes a game, and just cause damage. So I love his role.
Do you think he'll just continue to be versatile and used in all these different positions? Or do you think, like, he did really well in that 10 role against PSG? You've got Onana and Kamara who, like, you know, you spent a decent amount of money on Onana. There's a player there. Like, we've just not consistently seen him. Kamara's so solid for them as well. Like, where does his future lay? Is he the one that'll have to move, or are the other ones going to be the ones that move?
I think if you see Villa once again getting back in the Champions League this year or in future years, you know, maybe they'll use Onana in that deeper role and Tielemans further forward. But I also think you want to be careful about where you play Morgan Rodgers, because I think Morgan Rodgers is one of the most exciting players in the Premier League, if I'm totally honest. I think he has had I can't really think of a better English player this season in terms of like a breakout campaign. Maybe Mars Lewis-Skelly. But Morgan Rodgers does feel like if it wasn't for Bellingham and Palmer and Foden when he's at his best as well, like, I'd be building kind of an England team around Morgan Rodgers.
It's funny you say that. For the Premier League, we've done a video on Morgan Rodgers this week because we wanted to kind of focus on his rise. Because if you'd said Morgan Rodgers would be in the team of the season, you know, and he's legitimate for a lot of people to be in that team of the season, I think a lot of people would have laughed at you. But when we broke down his goals, what was incredible is one goal in particular, which you can see in the video. He scans about 6 times. He picks up the ball. As he picks up the ball, he's scanned and looking. As he's driving with the ball, he's scanned to see his right winger. Imagine driving towards goal and he's scanning there. When he then lays it off, looks. He's then still waiting, looks. And then as the ball's coming, looks, he has a touch like blind so that he knows he can put it. Like he is seeing a lot physically. So impressive. Really quick feet. The ability to understand the body weight of the other players and manipulate the ball as well. And let players bounce off him and drive. I agree. I think there's bigger sort of superstars out there right now. But I think he's got a huge future, and I think Tuchel likes him as well.
He's made the Champions League look so easy as well. For a club that hadn't played in it for a long, long time, for a player that had never played in it, he just instantly looked at home. And they had a series of difficult games in the Champions League. You know, Bayern, Bologna's a difficult game, Juventus, Celtic away, PSG obviously, and you know they were outgunned by PSG and outclassed in the end. But I thought he was pretty impressive.
Totally. But that's not important. What's important is that Yuri. Sorry,
Yuri.
And last but not least, Arsenal. We're going to go with Leandro Trossard. 52 appearances, 10 goals, 8 assists. Offers versatility across the entire front line. Consistent performer who doesn't need to be a guaranteed starter. Brilliant squad player. You'll hear Roy Keane talk about this all the time. The likes of Solskjaer sitting on the bench, being ready to really impact the game. And I think in terms of it being an apology for him, I think he's been put into... We're talking about Semenyo there before I alluded to it. He's kind of been... He got brought in to be probably a squad player because you're hoping that Martinelli is your guy. And he can fill in and it allows other players to rest, but you've got a guy who's going to give you 7.5 out of 10. But he's kind of been thrust into being an out-and-out starter regularly, and that does just feel like a little bit of maybe a stretch too far to be at the highest level, a cheat code for the team as a part instead of a solid cog. And I think that's why people kind of maybe were turning their nose up at him or have done at different moments during the season. But he's a proper steady player, isn't he? I think he's kind of been undone by the circumstances overall, but he's kept going at least.
They couldn't have asked for more for a £20 million signing in a January window when they were trying to spend huge amounts of money on Mudryk, didn't get Mudryk, brought in Trossard. The reaction to him immediately was, really? Why? Like, from Arsenal fans. So to start off on that footing and have a relatively slow... I think his assist numbers were really good in his first 6 months, but I think he only scored once in the first 6 months that he was there. And then to build on every season. And actually this year, because of injuries, he's played the most minutes out of any Arsenal attacker, which surprised me personally. But Saka's had time out, Martinelli's had time out, obviously Havertz and Gabriel Jesus. And I don't think he's ever going to be a player that wins Arsenal league titles or wins them Champions Leagues or really top-level prizes. But he's been vital for this period where they have, up until this season, taken consistent step forwards. It just feels like now they could potentially upgrade on him.
So, who did we miss? Let us know in the comments down below. If you're watching this on Spotify, do follow The Ripple Effect. We've got lots of great podcasts. You can go check them all out. Go check out The Truth with Dougie Critchley as well. There's a link to that in the description. And last but not least, Leandro, we're sorry.
We're sorry.